welcome to our webinar on OpenFn, organized by the Code4Development Initiative, the open source initiative of the Inter-American Development Bank. My name is Yesenia Rodriguez, and I lead the technical efforts of the initiative. It is a pleasure to me to welcome you and to be your host for today. At Code4Development, we believe in the transformative power of open source software to modernize public services across Latin America and the Caribbean. Through this webinar, we aim to share tools, experiences, and good practices that governments and communities in the region can benefit from. Now, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Center for Digital Public Infrastructure, the CDPI, for their support in making today's simultaneous interpretation possible, as well as for their continued collaboration in advancing digital public infrastructure across Latin America and the Caribbean. We are pleased to be joined by Ana Maria Bermudez, Operations Associate at CDPI, who will share a few words about their work. Ana Maria, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Yesenia. Hello, everyone. Hello, IDB. Thank you for this invitation. Hi, all the OpenFn team. I'm Ana Maria, and I'm from CDPI, the Center for Digital Public Infrastructure. We are a global organization, nonprofit organization that has the goal to give technical advisory to all governments around the globe to walk with them in the pathway of building digital public infrastructure. So far, we have worked with over 80 countries around the world, and especially now in Latin America and the Caribbean, we are working in developing digital public infrastructure for Peru, Trinidad and Tobago, and we are working also in Brazil. So we are really excited of being in this webinar, especially because it's the last one of the year, but also because like a few months ago, we get to know these OpenFn DPG solutions, and we were really excited of this. And a couple of weeks ago in the Global DPI Summit, we get to know them deeper, and we're really excited that you get the chance to know them and to understand how this tool and this DPG could help all the governments in the pathway of developing digital public infrastructure. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria. And once again, our thanks to the CDPI team for their support in making simultaneous interpretation possible during this session and all the hard work that you are doing in the region. So before we begin, I'd like to also take a moment to welcome the 50 in 5 and the Red Real countries present today. 50 in 5 is a campaign supported by the IDB where 50 countries are committing to implement at least one digital public infrastructure in 5 years. Red Real is a network also supported by the IDB, comprised of ministries of digital transformation from Latin America and the Caribbean countries. So today we are very excited to present OpenFn, an open source platform that helps governments and social organizations integrate and automate their systems. OpenFn is designed to enable secure, scalable, and sustainable data flows that strengthen digital services and support innovation in the public sector. We are delighted to welcome Jack Hilton. Jack is OpenFn's Product Strategy Director, where he focuses on expanding the platform adoption and defining key features that enable impactful and scalable integrations. He previously worked on major government technology projects in the UK with Deloitte and later served as a digital transformation advisor at the Clinton Health Access Initiative, supporting ministries of health worldwide. So, throughout his career, Jack has championed the compromise of interoperability. And at OpenFn, he is actively helping make it a reality. We also have Lucy McCarthy here. She's a web developer at OpenFn, and she's going to be helping us in the Q&A section also. So, Jack, thank you for joining us. Over to you.
Amazing. Well, muchas gracias y gracias a todos My Spanish is not quite good enough to continue this session in Spanish, but with a bit more practice, maybe next year I'll give it another go. But yeah, thank you everybody for being here, and thank you for the introductions. Hopefully you can all see my screen, and maybe Jasenia can give me a nod if that's true.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Great. Thank you. So yeah, my name is Jack Kilton. I work with the OpenFn Digital Public Good, and I work at OpenFunction Group, which I'll explain a little bit more about today. And I'm based in the UK, which is freezing cold and quite late at night right now. And I just got back from Cape Town at the Digital Public Infrastructure Summit last week, or a couple of weeks ago. Which is a great opportunity to spend time with lots of folks on this call. And hopefully I can share some of the learnings that were discussed there today, and explain how OpenFN is playing our role in supporting the development of digital public infrastructure, specifically with respect to data exchange all around the world. Cool. So what is OpenFN? We're a DPI building block for data exchange and for government service automation. We've had 3 million workflows per year, and we can show you. I'll get into the impact metrics tracker that we have live, but the product has been deployed across 40 different countries and has enabled secure data integration and interoperability for 75 governments, NGOs, and SMEs worldwide since the inception of the product a while ago. And the key kind of premise of the platform is about looking at diagrams like these. So you might have seen or drawn a diagram like this one, where you might want to register the birth of a child in Code Toolbox, but that could also be in any other kind of form collection service. Back that up to a serious database, generate a citizen registration, then generate a national ID for newborn children, for a newborn child, and then send a confirmation of that to the mother, either via WhatsApp or via SMS or something like that. And often when we think about these flows, we think that's really cool. And we often know which systems are selected to be each one of these different building blocks. And we often forget about the lines, or at least we don't productize the lines. And OpenFN exists to make those lines easier to initially build upfront and then to maintain them over time and make the process of building and maintaining those integrations a lot easier. Another one might be receiving data input from a field agent and backing that up to some kind of CSV file, because Excel will never die, reporting that into a management information system, registering a stock out in a logistics management information, and then again, like alerting field workers to latest stock levels using WhatsApp or SMS. And again, OpenFN does the lines. Or it could be something like in your day-to-day work when you're receiving a meeting transcript into Gmail, processing that through ChatGPT, posting something to Slack to remind your team that this has happened and this was a summary of the meeting, drafting some project requirements maybe based on that so that you've got an initial draft ready to go and as part of an email follow-up. Or maybe like creating or updating an opportunity in some kind of CRM, for example, or case management software that you're using. And again, OpenFN is about stitching together those different systems to make the workflows work more cohesively. So OpenFN makes the lines between those systems real. It integrates systems and automates the repetitive tasks that underpin the services that we rely on in an affordable and scalable way. The platform makes building and maintaining integrations between mission-critical systems easier, more repeatable, and more scalable. Now, it's not that these kinds of things, the lines on those diagrams don't happen ever today. They are happening sometimes, very, very regularly. Those are happening manually by humans inputting data between different systems. My background is primarily in the health data space, and very frequently when I was do field visits and go to see how healthcare workers were actually being asked to interact with their data, they would be inputting kind of case level data on a daily basis. And then once a month or once a week, they would be requested to manually input the data from their case management system into an aggregated data system like DHIS2, for example. And this is obviously quite slow. It's very error prone because humans are bad at inputting data. It's quite unsafe because humans are interacting with the data unnecessarily. Sometimes additional humans are involved when they don't need to be. And overall, it's just quite inefficient. And we have software which is capable of doing this stuff. And sometimes that is being delivered and built by consultants. And tech consultants can do this. They can build integrations between different systems. Often that can be expensive. So consultants will and tech people will build these different integrations between different systems. But it's also, once it's in code, so let's say someone's built a Python script or a PHP script between these various different systems, it's not very reusable. So it's not an artifact that you can easily interact with. Often there's no visibility. So for less technical folks who might be on this call, product managers or people who are not hands-on coders, it's quite hard to kind of interact and understand what's actually happening. And then there's often no error handling. So great, you can get the data to move from system A to system B today, but is that still working in 3 months' time? And if it's not, who finds out about the fact that it has stopped working? And overall, there's just kind of visibility and understanding about how the lines between these different systems are actually functioning. And so OpenFn exists to try and address some of those problems. So what actually is it? I'll jump into a demo and hopefully you guys can see now the actual product in action here. Now, as you can see, this is the OpenFn interface. I am a member of several different projects that you can see down the left here. Right now I'm using Jack Demo. This is always online. We have, I'll get into it later, but we have basically a SaaS version of the fully open source digital public good. So if you want to create an account and start playing around with the platform, you're always able to do that. Or you can get the source code from GitHub and run it locally as you prefer. But yeah, we have projects over here, and projects are made up of several different workflows and have different users within them. And when I come into a workflow, the build experience here involves a number of different templates. So what we're super excited about in building with the digital public infrastructure community is the idea that there's quite a lot of kind of reusable templates which involve integration between different systems. OpenFn as a product has been used a lot in the health space, so we've worked a lot with DHIS2. And you can see here, for example, a template which involves fetching tracked entity events from DHIS2, transforming those events into aggregate data, and then submitting that aggregate data into DHIS2. So that initial exemplar that I gave of humans manually inputting data between the case management system and then into the aggregated system is automated with this implementation of the OpenFn template. Yeah, other ones involving lots of digital public goods that hopefully folks on this call will be familiar with. I know that Kobo Toolbox has previously presented on this series as well as many others. And there are, plenty of different adapters, which I'll explain in just a while, which allow you to more easily build integrations between the systems that you are regularly building integrations between. And then in our kind of SaaS platform, and this is configurable if you kind of bring your own LLM, but we also have a kind of build with AI experience. And so here, the prompt that I prepared earlier is talking about the idea of, using a cron trigger. So every week on Monday at 5 a.m., I want to prepare a query in OpenFn Common, which I'll explain in a second, then grab all the new events from Comcare and Kobo Toolbox at the same time. Then I want to consolidate all that data using an OpenFn Common adapter and share the data into a Postgres database. And based on the data that is stored there, I want to either create a summary report of incomplete data using an LLM like ChatGPT, and then send that summary to Jack using Gmail, or if the data is complete, send it to OpenIMS to update the beneficiary registry. And so what we get is a high-level summary of what I just requested, essentially. So preparing the initial query, fetching the events from Comcare and Kobo Toolbox, and then consolidating that data, storing it in Postgres, and then depending on the state of that data, there is a kind of dependency here, and I can either generate an LLM-based summary talking about what data is incomplete and sending myself a Gmail there, or if everything is hunky-dory and working as expected, then I can update the OpenIMS beneficiary registry. Now this is just the kind of the workshopping phase of a given project. So when you're building this kind of workflow, it's really important to get the actual workflow design right up ahead. But the actual work to then dive in and start building the code which sits behind it obviously takes some work. And so in the platform, we have a JavaScript IDE or integrated development environment. And this can also be interacted with for more technical folks on the call. The whole workflow can be interacted with through the command line interface. So we have a CLI, which is very mature and easy to interact with if you prefer not using the UI and instead just building directly in the terminal, then you can do that. And then within each of these steps, we also have an AI assistant. So again, at build time, you can be using an AI assistant to help you build the code required to do whatever you want to do inside each of the individual steps. Now, in this case, we're using the Comcare adapter. And actually, maybe if I just jump out and jump into, I don't know, DHIS 2.1, for example, which is a fairly well-known digital public good. When I jump into here, you can see that within the API adapter, I have a number of different helper functions for popular interactions with the DHIS2 API, which gets stored and can be added to over time by obviously the full open source community that can be contributing to this core platform. And the DHIS2 adapter in OpenFn has developed and emerged over time. We have some magic functions, which I can share more about in a deeper dive if people are interested afterwards. But yeah, the ability to interact with the DHIS2 API is possible through this adapter. The credential management within the platform also means that you can be storing specific credentials at a project level and sharing them with the people that you work with. So inside this OpenFN project, I can have my credentials for DHIS2, in this case, the demo credentials set up, and therefore they're stored at rest, encrypted at rest, and can be shared between different users as needed. So people can be sharing data between different APIs without needing to manually store those separately, for example. Then in terms of, so that's kind of an example of the build process and how you go about building these workflows. Just to jump into a specific example and quite a DPI related example. In this case, we worked with the Singapore government, which has a digital public good called FormSG, which is their kind of form builder, basically. So allows you to complete or allows them to build forms. And when people submit form responses, in this case, what they wanted to do is demonstrate how the submission of a FormSG form could be decrypted. So initially it arrives in the OpenFN workflow encrypted, and within the OpenFN adapter here, they're decrypting the inputs that they get, and then transforming that data so that it is in the correct format to be sent to Sunbird, which is another digital public good, which is a specialist in issuing verifiable credentials. And then in this case, what they're doing is generating a PDF of the verifiable credential and then delivering it to the citizen as required based on the form inputs from here. So if I run this, for example, from this step with an empty input, then we can see the thing running here, and it'll transform the data that came in from the initial form, issue the verifiable credential, and then fetch that as a PDF. And then excuse my very messy inbox. But in here, I've just received this verifiable credential, which has come to my email address. And so, yeah, just kind of shows how the verifiable credential can be developed and generated inside the Sunbird system and then sent to my email via a Mailgun alert. And obviously that could be any other downstream system. The OpenFn platform exists entirely to integrate other systems. In some senses, we don't do anything ourselves, and we're very purposeful about that. We kind of stay in our lane as much as possible, and instead we just support other providers to be integrated more seamlessly together. Cool. So then that's an example of a running workflow. And as I was showing you on the canvas, we also have the ability to then audit and understand when things have been going wrong. So every workflow that has been run within your project, you can see the history page here. Depending on your configuration, different people can be alerted when something has gone wrong. And that's super important for when yeah, clearly something always goes wrong when you're talking about data integration, because getting data from system A to system B, everything changes if system B changes the name of, I don't know, government outpost 3 to government outpost 4, then software doesn't like it when there's kind of nuance. So as soon as something goes down like that, it's really important that people hear about it. And so within the OpenFn platform, people can be alerted to the fact that there's been some kind of discrepancy and there's been some kind of failure between the different systems. And I can come in here and inspect why that has happened. In this case, it's because you can't decrypt the same form input several times in a month, which is just part of the decryption methodology that comes from the FormSG product itself. But if I inspect this step, I can understand what's happening in the logs, see what's actually gone wrong. And we're working at the moment on creating some kind of AI error handling so that you can get a summary of what's going wrong and get suggested fixes and potentially even automated fixes on the fly. But yeah, in this case, we're seeing that signature is not recent for URI, which yeah is to do with the FormSG adapter there. I can visualize that on the canvas, so I can see all of the different runs that have been demonstrated on the canvas here. And I can also just see and filter for all of the different workflows over time, depending on which ones I'm looking at. Cool. Then in terms of settings, so we've been in the actually, I'll just jump back into my demo project so that I can show you more easily. So yeah, in terms of settings, we've been in the impact space and been dealing with a lot of sensitive information. I'll get into some project details a little bit later. But one thing I wanted to call out in terms of data storage is that it's fully configurable as to for how long or how much data you are storing. So the history retention period can be configured based on what you need. In this case, I'm demoing from the free plan on the kind of SaaS provider, but if you're using the open source project, then this is configurable by your kind of super user. The input and output data storage policy depends on what you need, and so there is what we call a zero persistence pipeline, which means that OpenFn doesn't see the data that is passing through it. It stores the logs and it stores the metadata of the fact that a certain workflow has happened, but it doesn't store the actual information within it. which can be useful if you're dealing with particularly sensitive data. And we often have done that with different health projects, for example, where sensitive health data is being moved from system A to system B, and there's no reason for OpenFN to store that. The only issue is that retrying workflows becomes a little bit more complicated because we can't see the data to rerun it. I mentioned the storage of credentials. You can have these in here and share them across different projects. We also have keychain credentials, so you can create basically multiple workflows of a single template, depending on the credentials that people have stored, which I can get into in a follow-up. A bit of a super user feature there. Collections is our kind of answer to data storage. Usually we encourage folks not to use too much data storage within an OpenFN workflow. But for example, for storing data dictionaries and pulling the latest version of a data dictionary or some kind of data standard, for example, it can be useful to have that as reference material within a given OpenFN workflow. So we do enable some kind of basic data storage within collections. Webhook security, if your workflow is being triggered by a webhook, so an event coming from an external system, then you want to lock that down and make sure that there's authentication around that. Collaboration, I've talked about kind of normal roles-based access control, and then multi-factor authentication, if that's a requirement for your security, then we can do that. And finally, we have GitHub sync. So if you're building again, using the open source version of this product, then all of the workflows that you build can be synced to a GitHub project. And for example, if I jump into a workflow like this one, then I'm able to view the workflow here as YAML code. So all of the workflow, which looks pretty on this screen, software developers often prefer just seeing it as code. And so this can be shared out here. David, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you so much, Jack. Actually, the session is going like really great, and I think we have a very nice set of questions that we would like to ask you before we move to the next case.
Sure.
And are really related to what you are just saying right now. For example, Gabriela Jimenez is asking, can anyone, even if we are not programmers, try using the OpenFN platform? I am interested in learning, but I am a lawyer.
Love it. Yeah, so I'm also not a software developer, and I have built OpenFN workflows. I am reasonably technical, so the sweet spot is integrating different APIs. So if you're not familiar with APIs, we can offer training on how that works, but I guess that level of technical understanding is probably required before you can just get going. But people are maybe familiar in 2025 with the term vibe coding. And we have this AI assistant, which is built into the platform, both at the kind of canvas level here, and then, as I mentioned, in each individual step as well. And so if you don't know what to do, ask the AI is my advice, and see how far it gets you. A word of warning is that as with every AI assistant in the world right now, sometimes it takes you down a huge rabbit hole and you can't do what you want it to do. And then you're like, man, I'm frustrated. We are working to try and get the specific OpenFN AI assistant to be better, and every day it is getting better. But yeah, the reality is it's not always perfect right now.
No, of course. And thank you so much for your answer. So we have another one related to the workflow that you were presenting before. This is coming from Eric Ramirez, and he's asking, is it possible to implement conditional gateways or paths on the integration workflow?
Yeah, nice. Good question. Yes. So we have, for example, here in this case, check if the table exists in the database. Table exists here. So you can either, the different options for the conditions on the paths is matching a JavaScript expression, or it could be like always run it, or it could be like on failure or on success. So yes, a very common use case is if such and such happens, then go down this pathway. If something else happens, then go down another pathway. And yeah, there's kind of full flexibility in terms of the JavaScript expression side of that that you can incorporate into the workflow.
Thank you. And maybe I think I'm going to collect a few more questions before I bother you again. So maybe we can continue with the presentation. I'll collect a few more and I'll come back to you.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
A very useful interjection as I was getting bored of my own voice. So thanks, David. Cool. So yeah, I mentioned history. I mentioned settings. Sandboxes is actually an experimental feature right now, which we haven't fully publicly launched yet. But the idea being that you can build in your kind of development environment. So if you're dealing with kind of national infrastructure and you're building integrations between lots of nationally important software systems, obviously making a change to that live workflow is a scary thing to do. And so it makes sense to create what we call a sandbox environment so that you can build in a kind of development environment before pushing that to production. And so you can run all of your kind of tests with your different test environments before actually making it live. Cool. I think I'll switch over. I'm happy to jump back into the product if people have specific questions later. But in terms of what to kind of summarize what I've just shown, the whole premise of the digital public good, and this is an ongoing project that we are very keen to collaborate on and welcome inputs from the whole ecosystem. But the goal is that it makes it easier to integrate any software and shortcut API integrations via those adapters that I referenced earlier, and create templates to make it easier to create these reusable artifacts that fulfill the kind of the lost lines in between the different systems and the diagrams that people often dream of, but often struggle to create in reality. It's about automating critical workflows and data exchange processes, centrally managing and orchestrating data exchange across a given ecosystem, and then monitoring in those different workflows across your tech estate. And as I mentioned, handling errors is a super important thing. The AI assistant and building the workflows at the start is kind of glitz and glamour and looks cool. But the true value here is the fact that when something falls over and you're dealing with national infrastructure, it's really important that someone finds out about that and can fix it as soon as possible. Ideally, that can be automatically fixed by some kind of AI assistant. But in the meantime, just making sure that someone finds out that this integration has fallen over is super important, and that comes out of the box as part of the platform. Ensuring data security compliance, I'll talk about that in a sec. And then deploying locally as a DPG is obviously a key tenet and the reason that we're on this call. Cool. So adapters, I've referenced them a few times. We have a whole suite of adapters, which makes it easier to integrate between these different API documentation. And then if you don't have a specific adapter for the system that you're hoping to integrate with, those who are more technical on the call might be familiar with HTTP, which is the kind of universal language for making requests to APIs. And we have a generic HTTP adapter, which allows you just to make those requests. And if you're a lawyer or a less technical person on the call, the AI assistant will be able to help you navigate this. So ask it questions. And in terms of contributions to the digital public good, building new adapters for systems that maybe our core team hasn't heard of or hasn't interacted with before is a really, really common way that people first interact with the OpenFn platform. And we really welcome people to create new adapters for different systems that you guys work with regularly. So if anyone on the call has an API or is responsible for a system that has an API, and you wish that more people found it easy to integrate with that API, then please do feel free to raise a pull request using the OpenFn documentation, which I can share afterwards, or maybe Lucy can drop in the chat. We have pretty good guidance on how to create a new adapter, and we really welcome people to get involved in that way. Yeah, the platform is a GovStack digital public infrastructure building block, and we work with the Center for DPI and various other institutions to kind of collaborate and pull together these different digital public goods to create these kind of cohesive systems and solutions out of these different building blocks. In terms of some specific project examples, so one example is, well, I guess one thing to note is the true value of something like OpenFn is it to be adopted by governments and by large organizations as this kind of core capability. So what I'm about to show is some kind of very specific workflows. But really where we've seen the most impact is when we work with like larger organizations who flex the muscle of building integrations as a concept. And so yeah, I'll talk about these specific examples, but really it's about like just as you use kind of Gmail for sending emails, Microsoft Word for writing documents, using some sort of orchestration layer or automation tool like OpenFn to be building integrations between different systems and kind of mapping out your workflows is super important. David, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Jack. It's me again. And just for everyone's information, I'm going to be posting a few resources on the chat. And also, we're going to be sending the recording of this session. We're going to share it in our YouTube channel. As you know, we always uploaded them. And as well with the other very useful resources that Jack is talking about now. So don't worry, you'll get the information. And Jack, I think this next set of questions are going to be very useful to set you in the mood for the next stage. For example, these ones are coming from our colleague Jose Freixinus. One of them is asking, is it possible to automate workflow testing? I think that's where you're leading right now. There are a couple more questions from him. Would you like me to read them all, or you want to answer one by one?
I can answer one by one. Although I'm not quite sure. What do you mean by did you say automate workflow testing?
Yes. He said he was asking if it's possible to automate workflow testing. But we can always start also with another one. Is it possible to have a version control for workflows and their integrations?
Got it. Yes, so that sandbox feature that I was referencing before, which allows you to create a sandbox from your main project, is one way that we do this kind of version control. So you would pull it down into the sandbox, into the dev environment, and in that sandbox, you would be interfacing with between the different systems sandboxes, if that makes sense. So from OpenFN's perspective, we're just the pipes. So we kind of, it doesn't really matter which version of OpenFN technically that you're using, because we're just pushing data between different systems. The important thing is that we work with you and the systems that you are integrating between to make sure that when you are hitting I don't know, dev environment for DHIS2, for example, that is hitting the dev environment and you're sending from the dev environment to another dev environment. And then once you decide consciously that you want to make that to the live environment, then everything changes at the same time. So yeah, this sandbox feature is one way of doing that. It's very easy just to duplicate workflows. So just with naming conventions within your OpenFN project, you can have several different versions of a singular workflow and just replicate that and make changes in a different version, for example, and kind of switch that one on and switch the previous one off as needed. So yeah, there's a number of different ways that we kind of deal with version controlling, and always really happy to hear if there's kind of specific things that you have in mind and features that we should develop in the future, or if you want to develop them yourselves as a digital public good. So yeah, always keen to hear more.
Oh, of course, very interesting. And this one is also like, is it possible to export the code to save it in a version control system?
Yeah, well, I guess your GitHub, if you're syncing to GitHub, yeah, I think I need to get into the intricacies of the question a bit more and try and understand more about what you're thinking there. But yeah, as I said, your GitHub sync can allow you to basically maintain everything that you have in your OpenFN project can be also replicated in your GitHub project. So that's one way of doing it.
Great. I'll collect a few more and eventually get back to you. In the meantime,
Yes.
I'm going to be sharing these useful links to everyone on the chat. Thank you, Jack.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Cool. So yeah, in terms of practical applications, as I said, the core value add from OpenFN comes from building the capability to build the N+1 integration across your ecosystem. So as you build up the version of OpenFN for the ecosystem within which you work, all of the different adapters and for all of the different systems that you regularly work with become easier and easier to interact with. And so the examples that I'll show you here might just become one example of many, many different integrations and workflows that you build and maintain. But in the case of Ghana, so right now when a baby is born in Ghana, their data is registered in the National E-Tracker, which is a DHIS2 based system and does some case management, but crucially registers the details of both the mother and the child. And the data which is stored there is exactly the same data which is then required for the birth and death registry and also for the national ID system. And until now in Ghana, the mother has been responsible for manually tracking to the birth and death registry and then manually tracking to the National ID Authority, both times taking paperwork and evidence of the various different digital information that is required, and then generating the birth certificate and then the national ID. Whereas what we've been able to do with OpenFN is take what was previously a kind of very flimsy PHP script, which is kind of vaguely holding these different systems together and therefore wasn't actually turned on in production, into a much more robust integration between the various systems, and then automate the creation or the sending of an SMS to the mother, which just speeds up the process of creating that national ID and then alerting the mother with that information, which then allows the mother to claim for national health insurance for the baby, for example, and yeah, generally just receive that information a lot quicker. In Thailand, we're working with the Ministry of Public Health and with UNICEF to basically integrate the Thailand's Child Shield predictive analytics product, which takes the data and looks up what's been reported regarding different children, looks up whether or not they are at risk of violence or abuse, and then returns a risk score into the case management system by UNICEF, known as Primero, and allows caseworkers who are looking out for vulnerable children across Thailand to understand more about the children that they are treating and that they are handling. In St. Lucia, we worked on a data integration project for immunization registries, and so identifying the St. Lucia National Health Information Database and integrating that with the DHIS2 immunization dashboard allowed for regular integrated reporting across the St. Lucia. In Brazil, we have worked with Ital Social to support on scaling an educational hub, and again, automating the data syncs across different custom apps for program monitoring, and then integrating that into their management software, so they're using Salesforce, and so pulling data from the various different systems and pushing that into Salesforce is how they've been using OpenFn. We're also deployed in agriculture. I think in the interest of time, I'll keep moving, but we'll circulate these slides later as well. So yeah, I think as I mentioned before, that one thing that's I think useful to be clear on is that often when we think about these kind of integrations, we think about the actual physical movement of data from system A to system B, which is that big yellow box in the middle. And that's what people tend to think about. And what they forget, or at least when they remember, they realize that the scale of the project becomes a lot bigger than they previously thought it was going to be, is all of the white boxes around the side. So where are you actually going to host the workflow that you've built? How are you going to manage the access to that workflow? How are you going to make it visible so that other people can interact with it before in the future? Do you need to do cron management, etc.? And the key thing is that with the OpenFn platform, all of that can kind of fade away into the background, and developers and product teams and people who are interested in automating these different services can focus on just the unique workflow itself. I think this should go without saying, but I guess the priority for the platform and the way that Open Function Group builds the platform, and when we kind of approve pull requests from the community, we're always prioritizing security, stability, and scalability. So S3 is kind of the mantra. And so we're making sure that all data that is flowing through the system is protected and is safe, that the platform itself is stable, but also crucially that it's super scalable. And yeah, if there's others on the call who want more details on the kind of technical architecture of the platform, then happy to share how our kind of workers-based architecture starts pulling from to process large amounts of data in a small amount of time. I already talked about this, but zero persistence data can be super valuable for a lot of government and different projects which have sensitive data involved in them. So it can be useful to basically not allow OpenFn, the workflow engine, to see any of the data that is being passed through the system. And so yeah, you can just turn on the zero persistence data pipeline and not process and not store any of the data that is flowing through it. So this is a live anonymous impact tracker. So it's a fully open source digital public good. As I mentioned, Open Function Group is the kind of primary steward. So it's a public benefit corporation, technically registered in the US, but we have colleagues in 12 different countries around the world, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and European time zones. But soon that's to be changing based on this call. Yeah, we're the kind of primary stewards of this digital public good. But what we're interested in is increasing the uptake and the usage of the software itself for impactful causes. So this anonymous impacts tracker tracks the usage of the DPG. So every time someone deploys the DPG locally on their own servers using the deployment methods, then they get a message saying, hey, by the way, if it's okay with you, and obviously there is a way of opting out, but if it's okay with you, we'd like to store some information anonymously about how the data is or how much data is flowing through the servers that you're overseeing. And so here you can see we launched version 2 of OpenFn, which had more of a kind of visual workflow builder. You can see from this graph when it began, and then over the last year or so, we've really started to kind of grow the uptake and push it around the world. Right now, we're in 40 different countries around the world. The OpenFn multi-tenant SaaS product is in Switzerland, so that's the top one with the most active users. But then we also have deployments in Senegal, Tanzania, US, etc., all around the world. And hopefully after this call, quite a few more in Latin America. So again, we'll share this afterwards, but feel free to check out the anonymous impacts tracker there. And if there's other digital public goods enthusiasts or folks around, this is often a kind of hot topic, and we're keen to really work with other digital public goods to be doing more of this kind of impact tracking, and understanding more. It's great that people are using the free and open source software around the world. Sometimes it can be frustrating because we don't know anything about it. So if people are interested in working together on trying to get a bit more visibility, then we're very happy to work with you on that as well. Cool. So in terms of the kind of core offering, the software is available online, and again, we can share all the links, etc. We have really good documentation and a very active community where we can answer any questions that people have while they are deploying. As I mentioned, Open Function Group is the primary steward of the OpenFN digital public good. And so we have kind of attempted various different approaches to being a sustainable organization to maintain that. The reality is right now we take a lot of donor funding. And so a lot of the implementations, like with a lot of digital public goods, are funded by different donors around the world, and development funding as well. But we also have this managed kind of hosted platform version, which one makes it keeps us honest and makes sure that there is always a secure, stable, and scalable version of the product deployed on our servers and available for people to sign up to every single day, all the time. And we have 99.99999% uptime each time. But then obviously at the same time, and sorry, that's appealing for those who maybe don't have the capacity to do the DevOps required to spin up their own version of the code. And honestly, if you're not already maintaining many other open source tools on your own servers, it's the most economical version. It makes much more sense if you don't have kind of specific restrictions. It can make a lot more sense just to use the hosted platform. And I think in terms of scalability of software in general around the world, multi-tenant SaaS tends to be the cheapest way that software can be scaled around the world. But we also understand the value of providing the fully open source version at the same time. And then, I think a pretty common model is that we also provide consulting, training, and support services. So in terms of the core team that we have these different offerings, so platform, capacity, and execution. And depending on the different phases of the project that folks are working on, we are able to help as an organization with initial kind of discovery, and then development, implementation, and ongoing operations. The thing that we do, that we are the kind of specialists in right now, is this kind of platform end of things, and the capacity building. So platform hosting, and if it's a kind of local deployment, then we also offer a long-term software warranty, for example, and we can also provide priority support. But then we also work with implementation partners, and we really prioritize working with local teams around the world who understand the local environment and in general are just better placed to be interacting with governments and other folks that they're building for, to actually do the kind of workflow development. And then we will also be there to support with that kind of core platform provisions and be supportive if and when they need help with kind of project scoping. But the model that we tend to follow is that we work with these implementation partners or system integrators, system implementers around the world, to be building the workflows as they go. And then, I guess I've kind of mentioned this a couple of times. We tend to talk about OpenFN as an integrator of kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 systems in a singular workflow. It tends to be the way that people understand how the platform works. But the reality is that the adoption of OpenFN as your kind of core interoperability layer or integrating with what is already kind of set up as a kind of bespoke interoperability layer, for example, just creates that scalability, which is the thing that we think provides the most value in the world. And so, yeah, we're working with a lot of kind of core government units around the world to kind of settle on a unified architecture on how to be continuously building these templates and these integrations between different systems. And so it can also scale to be this kind of core piece of infrastructure that serves to integrate many different parts of the ecosystem and have a centralized view of that kind of tech estate management. So managing workflows across time and getting the alerts as and when they are required. Cool. We've talked a little bit about this. Yeah, and in terms of the implementation team, very happy to share a lot of the implementation templates that we have. And a lot of those are available on our doc site and on community for folks to interact with there. So plenty more to read up on, and we can share as and when you need. Cool. Debbie, are there any more questions for me in the chat?
Yes, thank you, Jack. Actually, when you were talking about sharing the case of verifiable credentials, sorry, Valeria was asking if it's possible to issue QR codes through OpenFn. Is that something that is done through OpenFn or through other systems that you are connecting?
Yeah, so it's through other systems. In true kind of DPI fashion, I think that we are maybe too perfectionist in the sense that we try to stay as minimal as possible. So we don't do anything inside the platform. We specialize in integrating between different systems.
Yeah.
So if the requirement here is generating a QR code from as a verifiable credential, for example, there are lots of DPGs that specialize in doing that, and so you should integrate with them. And what we are specialized in doing is providing that integration and making it easier to build and maintain those integrations over time.
Great, thank you. Martin is asking right now, to better understand how to use the platform, could you share how you compare OpenFN to other tools like N8N or JVPM? In addition, does the platform provide any built-in or pluggable rules engines for decision making?
Yeah. So the in terms of comparisons to N8N, our main focus is on the impact sector, and being a kind of fully open source with no license and no venture capital funding to provide 10x returns on the focus and building for digital public goods and integrating digital public goods like DHIS2 and working with impact organizations like MSF and a lot of developing governments around the world. I think the values alignment is what tends to resonate with folks. But we also are observing and learning a lot from N8N. They've absolutely exploded. People should definitely check them out, and they're very much prioritizing the kind of agentic AI development space. And some of the stuff that's being automated in terms of like new TikTok content, etc., is pretty terrifying in some ways, but also super powerful. So yeah, we're definitely kind of observing and learning a lot from them. In terms of templates and building those, so yes, we have a kind of library of templates which is specifically built for the impact sector and working with the different DPGs that we have experience integrating between, and also a lot of the kind of legacy systems that we've worked with over the years in different governments, the kind of realities of integrating with those. Often the conversation is, hey, do you have an API? No, cool. Can we do a direct database integration, which is not ideal, but we have a lot of experience of doing that, and the platform has been built around that. Also for offline deployments, for example. So we do a lot of work with MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, support them to deploy basically an offline version of OpenFn alongside OpenMRS and DHIS2 to respond to crisis and manage crises on the ground. So yeah, a lot of kind of, I guess, niche requirements which we focus on, which other kind of venture capital funded Silicon Valley folks that are building some like amazing features, but don't tend to prioritize because it's not necessarily where the money is our play.
No, of course. Actually, we have a few more questions. The next two are related to storing data. I think I can collect and maybe you can answer. The first one will be, can you clarify storing versus not storing the data being fed into OpenFn? Is this a feature and option, or is it by default not stored?
Got it. Yeah, so by default it is stored, but it can be configured very easily from the settings. So where was I before? Data storage. So yeah, I think the default is storing the input and output of each run for 7 days. But that can be configured to literally whatever you want it to be. And it can also be like fully zero persistence depending on what your preference is. The reason that we do store it for a given time is because if something goes wrong, so like say there's some issue with the integration in the first place, if you haven't stored the data, then you can't kind of rerun it from a certain step. And quite often the value of using a platform like this is that you can understand when something has gone wrong and make sure that the data gets to where it needs to be at some point, even if that means you kind of have to come in and it's going to arrive a day late. The main goal is to make sure that the data is getting to where it needs to be. And so storing data to make sure that you can resend it is really important. But we also realize that sometimes because of different regulations, that's not possible. And so you can have the zero persistence pipeline if needed.
Thank you for that. We have another one, which is, what are the minimum technical requirements to adopt OpenFn to integrate databases from different sectors and use them as an input for a digital platform that we are building internally?
Good question. How to quantify the minimum technical requirements? I mean, I think this is not technically you can do a direct database integration, but really, and I think this is not really me as an OpenFN employee, it's just me as a digital public goods contributor and thinker. But really, like everyone should just have good APIs. Like that should just be a mandate for all DPGs. And I've spoken to the Digital Public Goods Alliance about this. Like I think that if we're serious about mandating that people have interoperable systems, whatever that means, at the very least, it must mean having an API which is publicly available as part of your documentation online, which allows to interact with different systems. And so I would say the first step is to make sure that every system that you are interacting with has an API of some kind, and that you can do the things that you want to do via that API. Then the process of creating an adapter in OpenFN, or indeed just interacting with that API via a HTTP adapter, it requires some JavaScript capabilities right now. We're also scoping Python, so you can kind of replicate the same workflows but using Python. If anyone wants to work with us on that, that'll be a really cool collaboration to improve the digital public good. But yeah, I'd say those are some of the technical requirements. I mean, arguably they're zero as well, because we have lots of implementation partners who can kind of handhold you through the process and work with you on that. So that's another option if you're not so technical as a team yourselves.
Thank you. And the next one is more, I think, related to the experience you've had through the years. And it's what considerations should be taken into account to ensure that an open source platform with an integrated approach remains compliant and unaffected by upcoming digital content regulations?
What's that last bit? An effective way of?
Unaffected by upcoming digital content regulations. to follow the legal framework?
Tricky question. I think well, in the case of OpenFN, the functionality that we provide is a very kind of neutral functionality. Like it's very purposefully middleware. It makes it easier to build these pipelines between different systems. The way the ecosystem into which that is deployed can involve all manner of different kind of requirements. And so we have been deployed in different settings, which have had different requirements and different kind of security requirements. Often we have this, Swiss deployment, which is easily the quickest way of getting started with OpenFN, but very often it needs to be locally deployed in country to adhere to data sovereignty laws, for example. But that's, all part of doing what's required. We also work a lot with X-Road, so people might be familiar with X-Road, which is another kind of digital public good and is basically a protocol for exchanging data between different systems. That is really powerful for locking down and ensuring that data is securely being shared, and so you can validate that systems are who they say they are when they share data. But the part that OpenFM plays in that ecosystem is making it easier to build those integrations in the first place. So sharing data between different systems is kind of in some ways made harder. Like there's a bottleneck created by X-Road and by other data exchange platforms in that sense. But OpenFN can work in collaboration with X-Road and be deployed alongside X-Road, for example, and within that ecosystem. So within that legal framework that has been set by the ecosystem to adhere to X-Road, it can then make it easier to build and maintain the workflows between the different systems within that ecosystem. I'm not sure if that fully answered the question, but it's maybe useful anyway.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you. And of course, the Q&A section is still open. I still have a couple of questions, but I think I'm gonna let you finish your presentation because these ones are more related to the closing. So
Cool.
The mic is all yours again. Thank you.
Great. Okay, sounds good. So yeah, I just wanted to talk to, maybe this also speaks a little bit to the specific question that the previous person was asking in terms of what are the kind of minimum technical requirements. When we think about an OpenFN project, we often think about these different phases of the project. So initially there's the business process consulting. So what is the process that you are looking, or what are the many processes that you are looking to automate and to integrate between different systems? Then, as I mentioned, the API and systems discovery, so ensuring that there are APIs that can be integrated with, and then ultimately designing the solution that is required to integrate the various different systems. Then comes the configuration and deployment of the platform or the various platforms that are involved, development of the workflows. So as I mentioned, right now the workflows are written in JavaScript, and the adapters that we have are in JavaScript. And then, unsurprisingly, as with any digital project ever, the training and rollout is a huge chunk of work, which is super important to get right in terms of longevity and sustainability of any given project. And then we also provide ongoing support as needed. And so all of those different areas of what tends to make a successful OpenFN project go well. And as I mentioned, the kind of business process consulting is a very much repetitive process. So like there are, I would argue, an infinite number of processes in any given ecosystem, and each one of them can very likely be automated in some way, or at least supported by the use of software and integrating different softwares. And as a result, understanding what your processes are is a really important part of the process of kind of automating those processes in the first place. And so we spend a lot of time with folks just understanding how stuff works before we then move into the actual development of those technical workflows. And so, yeah, in terms of implementation life cycles, For one to two workflows, that can be kind of 4 to 6 weeks to deliver end to end. And that is very variable. Sometimes we have much easier workflows, which can be a matter of days. Sometimes they're much more complicated workflows that require a lot more kind of logic and error handling, and that can take a lot longer. But generally, I'm sure, again, folks on this call who have done digital development projects in the past will see this as a familiar kind of workflow, but discovery and design, then building, testing, training and go live, and then roll out and ongoing support for whatever is being deployed is the way that our projects tend to work. It's slightly different when we're talking about adopting national scale interoperability layers. And really it's just about that rollout and support. And this becomes so much more circular or secular. So once we've done the rollout and support of this core infrastructure, which is now to be used as this interoperability layer, then how do we continuously identify and discover and design new integrations between different systems in a kind of repetitive and ongoing way? Cool. Interesting bit of dynamics on the slides. So yeah, that's all I was going to share today. Very happy to share more details. Yeah, those are some of the folks on the screen that you can get in touch with, but also here until whenever you need, really.
Great, Jack. Thank you so much. Actually, a lot of people were asking about your contact information and the resources that you've been sharing through the session, and I've been posting them on the chat, but also to make sure that they will be sent via email after the session, eventually a few days later. But thank you so much for this very interesting session. I actually, this conversation turned very technical at the end at some point. I was even having some trouble trying to read the questions because I was like, what do they mean? But I have a last question for you, which is coming from Doris, and I think this represents, a lot of other stakeholders and sector. And Doris was asking, how can a nonprofit organization adopt and implement OpenFn? Are there specific models or best practices for nonprofit settings? And yeah.
Cool. Yeah, good question. So the easiest way to get started is just to go to openfn.org, which is our website here, and then get started by signing up and registering to the platform. Depending on the kind of technical capability of your team, I would also recommend just reaching out to our team and to me. My email is can be in the chat, but it's jack@openfn.org, and we can help you to just kind of understand what the requirements are. We now operate more in the kind of digital public infrastructure space, and so working a lot with governments and central kind of governments to provide that kind of foundational capability. But historically, OpenFN started very much in the NGO space and working specifically with NGOs and doing some integrations of theirs, and we still do a lot of work in that space. So like I was mentioning with Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, we have a really long ongoing project with them, which, as I say, involves kind of offline deployments and data monitoring for their crisis response teams. We do a lot of work with Miracle Feet, who process huge volumes of data from their field reporting and things like that. We've done a lot of work with UNICEF and Wildlife Conservation Society, and all of them have differing levels of technical capabilities on their own team. So the key thing is just for us to kind of work out what you need. Is it the case that you have a tech team that can just kind of get started and start building workflows? If so, send them this and we can give you a quick kind of demo and actually build the first workflow with you. Or if you need more kind of hands-on technical support, then we have all of that support available as consulting services, either through Open Function Group, or depending where you are geographically, we also have local implementation partners around the world, which is a growing network of implementers that can build and maintain OpenFN workflows over time. And if you want to become one of those, also please feel free to reach out.
No, that's great, Jack. Thank you so much for this will to support these other sectors now and to actually build a community. With that was the last question from me. That will be it from my side, and I pass it to my friend Jess. Thank you so much, Jack.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jack, for your excellent presentation. And obviously, Lucy, thank you for sharing all these resources in the chat. So your work is obviously helping governments build more integrated, automated, and sustainable digital services. And as this is our last Code4Development webinar of the year, we want to extend our heartfelt thank you for all your support, all this community joining throughout all the 2025. Your participation, questions, and engagement are what makes this series meaningful. So thank you so much.
Muchas gracias.